Lawrence, I would suggest that we don't waste any time and we jump right into this new episode. Welcome, folks, to the Squeaky Wheel. With us today is a celebrated guest as far as I'm concerned, because recently you and I got to spend a little bit of time together, but Holly Anghel. Now, Holly, tell us, as we're going to, you've watched a few of our episodes. I like to think you've probably watched all of them, but let's be honest. Lawrence and I ranted for the first 50, probably considerably. So even if you've caught the last 5, I figure, hey, you're doing all right. But you are driving quite a bit of art through community right now. Let's talk a little bit about you before we jump into the conversation that we're going to be running through in the next little bit here on the Squeaky Wheel. And thank you and welcome to the show.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me here. I'm really excited that you've given me the opportunity to be here with you and Lawrence. It's really fantastic to be here.
The one of the questions that I find is predominant in the conversation when Lawrence and I have invited guests, and one that I actually enjoy when I'm invited into presentations and such, is everybody has a different feeling on their journey through the Métis community and the understanding of culture. Lawrence and I have talked extensively about the relationship that our families have had and parents who are musicians. In your case, I understand and thank you very generously for this beautiful beaded Memphis group symbol that you've created for me. And I know we would have loved to have been, sitting together in our office space as we normally do if it wasn't for the crazy Calgary weather that just hit us again today. But let's talk a little bit about your journey and where you are in that connection.
Yeah, so when I was a kid, my dad always made sure that all of us girls had our Métis cards. So I knew that I was Métis since I was a child, but I never really knew what that meant until I got into my kind of younger adult years, into my 20s. So I was raised, I would say, mainly with just Caucasian Canadian traditions. My dad was a hunter, but he would go out for a couple weekends a year and kind of do his own thing with us girls at home. So when I started to kind of feel like I had something missing that I couldn't quite put a finger on, and it turned out that it ended up being missing my culture, that I was able to research into being Métis. Through the Métis Nation of Alberta, I was able to register for their beading kits. And that's how I started beading. And that's what really started me on the journey about learning what it means to be a Métis person. I bead constantly now, like my fingertips are calloused. And that's kind of what started my research into who I am and what I do and what my family used to do, and just really appreciating my culture and my traditions.
I think it's a very personal journey. Lawrence, tell me, before Holly, for all of our listeners out there, we're going to be talking to Holly today a little bit about that journey, the beading, and then also the film work that you're doing now and your relationship with TELUS and how maybe some of that developed. And a lot of our listeners know Lawrence and I did some TELUS work last year, and we're always looking for those, those kind of relationships and definitely celebrating other people who have been through trying to work at explaining that journey. But Lawrence, there's lots of programs that are happening. We've heard this familiar story many times. And what's your take on how you respond when people, bring up that conversation?
Well, I'm not a very good beater myself. I've tried it a few times and it's just really bad on the thumbs for me. And,
yeah.
I can't really deal with pain quite effectively. But no, and patience too. But it predominantly for us, providing those programs, those beading kits are very, very important, especially now during COVID. But whatever we see as a benefit, I find that beading relaxes people, takes all the stress away. It's really good for mental health, and so we love doing those programs. I myself was born into the Métis community too, and certainly didn't. Those people never let me not remember who I was or being Métis. And the only thing we didn't really do, we did everything else, medicines, harvesting. I've seen beadwork when I was a kid, But certainly we didn't wave flags and wear sashes and stuff like that in the 80s. We definitely knew we were a Métis, and that's kind of our story. But people are sort of right now trying to find themselves, and sometimes we need those little entry level sort of things into our community, and providing beating kits is great. So that's just my opinion.
Oh no, and again, we all need that first connection with community, as far as I'm concerned. And for a lot of people, and even meetings we had recently at the Métis Mixer down here in Calgary, was again that conversation where people come and say, boy, I feel like a bit of an imposter. All I'm doing in the Métis community may be this one thing. Yeah, but I try to explain to them that one connection means you have started your journey. So let's go a little further now, Holly, into your journey. Before the next thing you know, we're going to be talking about a whole bunch of other Métis things that are happening through the province. Let's talk a little bit about that. All of a sudden, that one start of awareness seems to have led you down a journey, with filmmaking. Let's talk about that.
Yeah, so I think that one of the things that a lot of people struggle with is feeling like they're not Indigenous or Métis enough to be participating. So I definitely struggled with that, and still sometimes can find myself getting in my head about it. But if you can just do that one thing and you love doing that one thing, you're doing enough just by doing that and existing. So the fact that we're here is an incredible feat that our ancestors fought for us. So just by being here, we're Indigenous enough. And I think that just doing your best and being who you are and doing what you love to do is important. So for me, that one introduction into the community was beading. For other people, it might be weaving or, music or whichever you are connected to. But my connection into beading led into so many other things. So last year, I was given the opportunity to work with TELUS for the first time, doing beading tutorials. They wanted me to show off my skills, and they played that on TELUS Optic in the fall. And now this year, they've given me another opportunity in their edition called Voices to talk about our culture and share the information that I know. And I go into things knowing that I know some things, but I also have so much to learn. And every person that I talk to for my projects or just connecting in the community is able to share so much information with me that I would love to continue to spread. So that's what this new edition is about. So it's called Modern Métis Canada, and Ross is featured in it, as well as a couple other artists and herbalists, where everybody's just going to be getting together and sharing their knowledge. And it's going to be broadcasted on TELUS Optic, and it's going to be amazing.
I spent most of the time, folks, when Holly was chatting with me, I was posing like George Costanza from Seinfeld on a nice long couch. So yeah, you're going to have to watch for that one. But yeah, thank you. And thank you for that message, because I think what happens in a lot of our community is that youth are afraid of opening that door. One of the conversations that is predominant is a lot of elders had said, growing up, they were told, you know what, don't bring it up. Don't say anything about being Indigenous. Don't say anything about being Métis. Just kind of ignore that. And they had their relationship with culture and identity, and with how their relationship with the church, depending on where they lived, was. So there was a bit of confusion there. But I'm finding we're in an opportunity now where we are seeing the youth having the opportunity for the connection and the awareness. Now we need to provide them the tools. And AlbertaMétis.com is doing some fabulous things. They're doing a Connecting Through Culture family retreat that's coming up. So folks, you're going to want to have a look at that. There was some harvesting and sustenance opportunities for conversation. There's elder recognition that's happening, and then elder and youth. So we're starting to see these programs, but I think it's fabulous. And again, thank you for this beautiful beaded symbol, which is a lot of the work that I'm doing when it comes to an environment and my connection with the land and community. Thank you for building that. Folks, let's jump on to some of the fun things that are happening. And I know, Holly, we definitely want your opinion in a lot of these things. One of the first things for our listeners out there is all of our here down in the South, they've started naming, and I like that they do this through a lot of cities now. And definitely I read about it a lot in North America. That we name our snowplows. I guess when we say down in North America, virtually anything south of Montana, they don't really have to worry about it. But here in Calgary, some of the fabulous names that they've started naming snowplows, and they get children involved, is there's a one called the Calgary Snow Flames, the Double Trouble Shovel, the Frosty the Snowplow, Icebreaker, Kaplow. There's Indigenous names, Kuasukoi, the La Chasneige, which I think is more French, but the Marta Scoop. Lawrence, I think we need to come up with a snowplow name for you. The El Presidente Snow Pusher, or the Ballet Snow Push, something like that. I think we need to, or the Squeaky Plow. Maybe that's what we should be coming up with.
No, I don't push snow, and that's a little too much work. And at the end of the day, I know you had a fabulous photo that you showed me yesterday from George, your dad, and it's a picture of a carryall, so an old snow sled.
Leighton, can you throw that picture up for us? I'd like our audience to see. This is my, I think it's my great grandmother back in the 30s. There it is on the. As she's on her dog sled team.
Yeah, and my question is, have you ever been on a dog sled, Ross?
Oh, Lawrence, you brilliant. Okay, here's the thing. I've been towed behind my parents on a toboggan. I have actually never been behind a dog sled team. So, folks, if there's any of you out there listening and you're interested in taking one of us or both of us or all of us here on the Squeaky Wheel on a dog sled team, this is an actual lesson that I need to learn. And in Calgary and in southern Alberta, pretty much right now, I think the only way to get around today is probably by dog sled, which Grandma apparently had said the best dog sled teams come from Meadow Lake, Saskatchewan. But I don't mean to interrupt you, Lawrence. That's just a little something for how are we certain that that's the case? My my relatives are also from Meadow Lake, but how do we know that those were the best dog sled teams? Yukon, Northwest Territories, right? I'm sure they had pretty good dog sleds too in the day. Holly, have you ever been on a dog sled?
No, but you know what? When I was a kid, we had a husky named Nanook, and every time I took him out for walks, it felt like he was pulling me and I was just sliding behind. So maybe that counts.
Well, I have to think so. And I know I've been dragged by dogs before, but I didn't have to do all of the work of trying to keep them alive or them keep me alive as we moved around. So I think there's a photo op there, Lawrence, for one of our next shows, as you and I are going to have to be on a dog sled.
Yeah, I mean, carryalls were the main, point of transportation for Métis, and during the winter, and it's nice to see a picture like that because you can kind of see, what our history kind of tells us in the old days. It wasn't just Red River carts. There's no way they could pull them during the winter, so we used sleds, right?
Yeah,
predominantly.
And this picture, this wasn't somebody just wanted to skip the dishes. This is an actual way that you are going around in order to retrieve the wares you may need to survive. Yeah, whereas now it's just we do a quick Zoom, fire off a quick text message, and food shows up 20 minutes later. But yeah, I think my dad didn't see a watermelon until he was in his 30s. That was just not the kind of product that ever made it up to Meadow Lake. There just wasn't that ease of transportation. One thing I wanted to ask you, Holly, was you told me on our conversation a little earlier, you'd gone to Kaylin Kodiak's event, or you were sharing an event with her. Lawrence, we were talking about her last week because her Bear Medicine's coming up I think it's in March. Let's talk a little bit about your experience on her event that she just had.
Yeah, so it was amazing. So that was yesterday. Yesterday was her bear medicine workshop. And then coming up in March, she has her balsam and medicine harvesting festival. But I went to her bear medicine workshop yesterday and it was a fantastic turnout. So I'd say there were probably maybe 20 people they're trying to learn about bear medicine. And it was interesting because we went around the room doing introductions about who we are, where we come from, what kind of Métis person we are. And everybody kind of had the same answer where they were all like, yeah, so this is my name, but I know I'm a Cree Métis, but not sure much else about it. So a lot of people who were there were reconnecting and there to just learn about how our ancestors used to use the bear and bear teachings. And it was very interesting. It was very cool.
Well, and I think that's one of those areas that we're starting to environmentally learn a little bit more about. When I get into conversations with industry, their first thing is, well, we just want to replant the land. I get that. But when we're looking at environmental replanting, we should also be replanting with Indigenous plants, and we're using the term Indigenous to the land. But also, if you're working with Indigenous communities, how do we do it that's respectful and ensuring that we are putting the land back to the way it originally was and that Mother Earth wanted it to be. So I think, when we start having and people are sharing new awareness, or it's not necessarily new, but we perceive it as new because we're finally opening these conversations, and we have people who are being involved in celebrating those. I think we're moving along in the track that we are going to start affecting change. And we're going to all be a part of that change. And, the Métis community, as Lawrence and I talk about just about every week, hey, province, yeah, the Métis people have been down here for a while. This isn't new. You can't just continue to deny that the Métis community wasn't down here. There's far too many cart paths that were put in by our community. Lawrence, let's talk a little bit about the Indigenous gathering place, because let's throw some good politics into this discussion. Lord knows everybody likes that. Where are we at?
Well, I'm actually a little tired of talking about IGP, but yeah, they approved the motion. It sets administration to do some of the engagement, which to me, I kind of see a bit of the conflict because they're the ones who are deciding the project and they're the ones who are doing the engagement. I kind of feel like engagement should be third party. They should be non-biased and should be done, accordance with, the Métis community and how we, speak to them. And that's probably the next conversation I'll have with the mayor and sort of discuss that. What are the best options for engagement? We have our own process at the M&A. We present that process to proponents and we treat the city of Calgary just like another proponent because this is their project. And certainly they'll have to listen to what that process will be, because I know Treaty 7 will have their own too. Now we can start sitting at the table and start learning about the project, because I have no idea where the thing is located. I have no idea who sits on their board, who their project developers are, anything like that. And really surprised to see our name attached as being a supporter on their website, even though they haven't done the engagement with us. And that was my whole issue before, was just pause the motion until, we all get to the table if you're listing us as partners. And that's a pretty fair comment. And I'm pretty sure Treaty 7 feels the same way. And they never did that. They decided to do the motion anyways. But now we have to do the engagement with the internal city administration.
And I get it. We call ourselves the Squeaky Wheel. Folks, if you're a listener out there and you're talking to one of your city councilors, it's okay to say to them, boy, Lawrence seems to bring this up and he seems absolutely right. How is it that, you're being listed and the city's doing its work? We seem to know, here it goes full circle, we seem to know more about the snowplow names in Calgary and everybody's involvement and engagement when it comes to naming a snowplow. And yet what we don't have is that conversation where if the city and hopefully the province is going to allocate Indigenous land and opportunities, in this case the city, if this is being allocated, shouldn't we be a part of that? You know, if it's up to me, the Indigenous gathering place will be named Ross and Lawrence's Good Time Establishment and Emporium. But hey, if they don't ask us, how are we ever going to get our names on that, Lawrence? So folks, if you're listening right now and you want to include Ross and Lawrence's name on this Indigenous gathering place, please send us an email. We'd love to read about that.
Yeah, I'm sure that's a joke. But anyways, yeah, I don't want my name attached. I prefer things just done the right way. And
Yes.
that's pretty much it, you know.
And I'm, you know, it is easy for us when we have these conversations in order to throw a few jokes back and forth, but you're absolutely right. It is shameful when we're not invited to the conversation, but yet it seems as though people have identified us as being involved. Let's talk about a few other things that are happening. Even in Ontario, it seems like at the community of Markham, which they're somewhat uncompromising. Steve Stamkos spent his youth growing up playing hockey on this pond, and now all of a sudden the community is like, you know, it's really not safe. They've been skating on that pond for about 50 years. That becomes, you know, part of the community. I get safety, but is there no responsibility of the individuals who are out there to ensure that they, you know, are doing it in a safe way? Where does some of that responsibility fall? Like, we are doing our part, Lawrence, of trying to talk and create conversation. You know, is there no ownership?
Well, I mean, I see safety on ponds, and I mean, I grew up on a slough right next to the slough, and we skated on that thing. And we didn't have a fear of drowning. We had a fear of falling in the slough and smelling, you know. So that was our fear. But no, it definitely what we grasp onto around us. But there are people that are a little bit reckless when it comes to activity on the ice. And as long as you're listening to the warnings, you're okay. Back in the 80s, they didn't have signs they put out that said thin ice. We just went on it. Some kids fell through, some adults fell through. But, you know, they got out, managed to get out because it's, you know, but you could easily get pulled under the ice and then that would be it. I mean, under a 3-foot water, you could still get pulled into the ice there too.
Well, and you could
So
get
you
hit
just
by
gotta be careful.
get hit by a snowplow, right? I mean, there's still some responsibility on individuals in order to manage their own time. I want to get back to Holly. I'd like to see get your input on this in Manitoba. And this, I think, would be a fun one because this is all of us still trying to understand and have conversation about Cree or Michif or language and things like that. And as we continue to explore culturally, but there was a family who's trying to name their daughter. Now, this one, I get, you know, Lawrence will slap me for every time I try to say an Indigenous word because I always say it wrong. But they want to name their daughter, I think it's Atetsintensea Way, which translates to forever healing medicine. But the Manitoba's Vital Statistics Act says when you're registering a child's birth, the given name and the surname must be consistent with the letters A to Z and accents from the English or French languages, including hyphens and apostrophes. So this name doesn't fall within that allowance. How do we work? Do we just allow anybody to throw any symbol or color or whatever idea into a name? How does the rest of the, you know, our community and us as citizens and our teachers, how do they manage that conversation? Like, I want to celebrate, you know, the names and definitely celebrate the Indigenous names. How do we include that?
You know, I think that that's a really beautiful name. And I think that if it ties to the family's culture and the child's culture, then she should be able to be named that. I mean, we've heard crazier names like Elon Musk's kid, who I still am not sure how to pronounce that name.
Yeah.
But I think that the name is culturally important to them. And, you know, it's just another limitation on Indigenous people who would like to name their child this, but is being told that they can't. So I think that there should be a workaround there.
And maybe that's
if you talk to, and you got to remember, Ross, this is a cultural thing. Mm-hmm. So, you know, we've had our names misconstrued, misinformed on the census since they started doing them, you know, in 1870 with Métis people. So, they screwed up our name, our family name too. They started calling us Jarvises because they didn't know how to spell Gervais or understand what that meant, right? And our names we keep, it's part of our history, it's part of our own language, it's part of our culture. And Canada, when they start doing these censuses, we're screwing up names right and left. You can talk to any genealogist who does family trees for Métis communities about that, and they'll say it's a bit of a headache because they got to look deeper, right, into these names. So, yeah, I mean, if that's the name they chose, and in this day and age, digital age, we can adapt to those names pretty quickly. So I think that they're entitled to name their daughter that name and keep that name because it's a traditional name, and I think government really has to adapt to it.
And I 100% agree. And that's why I enjoy having this as part of our conversation. I do think that our government's tried to oversimplify things when, right, they sent around the census people who just said, oh, well, this is close enough. At the end of the day, I'm just giving you a piece of paper and you can move on down the road, right? You're getting your script, off you go. And yet, we start to look back, and it's a conversation of how were families affected. When they try to look back at their own history and their own heritage, and they can't even follow their own, family timeline because, we lost a lot of that awareness. And maybe the government should be working a little harder to try and understand how to bring in culture rather than what historically has been happening with vital statistics saying, well, it doesn't really fit. We didn't ask you to make our name fit. Now we're telling you figure it out. This was our name to begin with. Why did you create such limitations? And I think there's going to be tools that are out there. Sadly, I think someday we'll end up just with all numbers because it'll be easier. And when you're in the world of computing, that sort of ends up being what everything is. It's just a bunch of zeros and ones that puts everything together. But I think there's a better way, and especially if we want to celebrate names. But then we have to do our part of explaining to me, so I have a better opportunity to understand how to pronounce something. That needs to be shared conversation and should be fun conversation.
That's right. And, I think the First Nation elders I always learned from in ceremony was always like, these names are a story. These names are a teaching. And in order for you to actually get those teachings 100%, you first have to learn the name, right? And that's predominantly important to culture. And it's in the call, one of the calls to action too about names. A lot of the students actually did lose their names and their traditional names, and now they're trying to sort of recover that.
And I 100% agree. Oh, Leighton, here comes the sound. Here comes the light. Lawrence, it's scam time on the Squeaky Wheel. Now, Holly, I know you've seen our show. Every time I try to just bring a little bit of awareness to all, whether it's the youth, whether it's the irresponsible people of Lawrence and I's age, and or your much younger age, or the elders, that there's one of the scams that's happening in Regina. Well, sorry, no, it's happening everywhere. But this Regina couple had, they'd connected with somebody online, and they said, listen, if you just review some of the materials, some of the products we're going to send you, review some of the stuff online, we're going to pay you $500. Well, they loved doing it. They gave their input, they gave their ideas, and the more products get reviewed, the more trust community seems to have with that product, especially if it's coming from, the Lawrences and the Hollys and the Rosses out there, and people are like, oh, well, then it must be a good product. Well, they get their first few dollars, and then that agency says, if you were to invest a little bit of money in us, you'll even get to review more. Well, the next thing you know, they were, all of the money they had, they were up to about $7,000, and then they had grown to about $15,000. And then all of a sudden, they weren't receiving any money anymore. Then they couldn't reach the agent who was helping them. All of that, their funds were lost. And it's a age-old scheme, a pyramid scheme, right? They're just trying to get you to put more money in and claiming you're going to get more if you're sort of at the top of the hill. So folks, when something seems too good to be true, it very likely is. And when it happens online, If you're not able to meet with these people, not have any connection with them, not have the awareness, the more money you put in, the greater risk you're at. So don't fall for that. But any opinions on, again, my usual comment that if you are not paying anything, you're the product. Any conversation?
Well, I think scams are bad, but at the end of the day, like I said before in previous episodes, you just get a flamethrower or anybody who kind of starts to mess with your money and your accounts and your well-being. And that's pretty much it. But keeping an eye out is very, very important, watching out for these things, especially when they start to hard press you.
Yeah. And where I'd like to finish our conversation is with a big thank you to Holly. But here's one of the most fun things that I'd like to have a conversation about was the Canadian women, our fabulous hockey team at the Olympics, won the gold. And Lawrence, you and I had talked about this before, and we never understood why CBC, unless we missed something, didn't interview the two Métis hockey players who were part of that successful winning game, Jamie Lerate and Jocelyn Larocque, both of the Métis Nation. Now, whether or not you spent most of your time watching the hockey games, you have to be excited to celebrate this win.
Yeah, I mean, pretty excited. Jamie Lee Rattray, I don't think she's Rattray, but we're pretty, it was nice to see Jocelyn Larocque. I mean, she's definitely one of the veterans on the team. I think this is her second Olympics, right? So she did quite well. She's a very quick player, and it's just so nice to see these Indigenous women out there on the ice. And I know Abby Roque was on the U.S. side, and she won the silver, and so but it's all about recognition, and I think that's important. CBC definitely did drop the boat on that one, but it's never surprising sometimes. You never know. It's always 50-50. I don't think they even noticed Dwight King won 2 Stanley Cups about 4 or 5 years ago with LA, and I don't think that was ever reported that he was Métis either, but that's just me.
Well, Lawrence, even I didn't know that. Holly, throw out your Olympic your comment.
Yeah, I'm not much of a hockey watcher, but I just love to celebrate when I see Indigenous people win, and I love to celebrate when I see women win. So when it's Indigenous women win, I'm especially excited. So I'm really happy for them and their success.
I saw this great meme, I think it was yesterday, and it showed a coach talking to the men's team saying, "You guys should play more like the women." And I thought, how great. Right, it's always a head-to-head competition. I'd like to see some of the other teams around our globe get a little bit stronger, so that creates a little bit higher competition. But right now, we do know that you're definitely genuinely going to see a good hockey game. That's going to be a competition between the Canadians and the Americans, and here we triumphed again. So. Thank you, Leighton, from behind the scenes. Holly, I can't say thank you enough. We really appreciate it. We're really looking forward to getting a little bit more information about what's been happening and where you're going to take the continued conversation with your filmmaking and tell us. We appreciate your opinions here on the Squeaky Wheel. For Lawrence and I, it's this opportunity where we try to share this awareness of what's happening both in this province and sharing the conversation that's happening in Canada. We've talked about the trucker convoy. I don't think we need to bang on that door too much here today. Everybody's watching as it continues to unfold, but we always appreciate everybody's opinion. I know that we will ensure that we continue to offer the same high quality podcasting that we try to provide. But Holly, when you come in there with your honesty and your awareness, we get a chance to learn from each one of you. So Lawrence, maybe close out the show for us today with a kind word.
Yeah, I just want to say thanks, Holly, for being here today with us. Maybe my beadwork is in the mail. I'm not sure. Next time I'll see you. But I want to thank Ross, of course, and the mixer was our business mixer was a success. I can't even talk today. And we look forward to the next one in March. And I think that's about it, really, at the end of the day. I think for me, for this last month, my journey is all about been recognition. And maybe I've been a little bit long tooth and fighting with government a little bit hard this last month. But maybe next month I won't have to fight so hard.
And Lawrence, I will continue to push you in front of every bus that I can. Holly, where could people reach you if they'd like to find out a little bit more about beading or about your filmmaking?
You can reach me on Instagram at just Métis things, or I'm on Facebook. You can look me up by my first and last name and shoot me a message, and I'll make sure to give you a reply. But Instagram, just Métis things.
Lawrence, that's an awesome one. I'll have to try and remember that. So, folks, for all of you listeners out there, thank you for your time. Make sure you continue to subscribe to us. Follow us on every aspect of way that you can. We're everywhere. And if all of a sudden you see Lawrence and I standing on the street, please slow down before you hit me. But if you need to hit Lawrence, please speed up. Thank you for all of our listeners. Best wishes. Take care.
Thank you.
Keep the wheel squeaking. The Squeaky Wheel is brought to you by the Squeaky Wheel Company. Co-hosted by the President, Lawrence Gervais, Memphis Region 3, and the Captain, Ross, Memphis, Pambrun. Our program is broadcast from Calgary in Region 3 of the Métis Nation of Alberta, which is part of the historic Métis Nation homeland. We also acknowledge these lands are the traditional territories of Treaty 7, Blackfoot Confederacy, Siksika, Kainai, Piikani, Tsuut'ina, and Stoney Nakoda, with whom we share this land on the basis of our historical and ongoing relationships. You can always reach us for comment about our programming by email at tsw@thesqueakywheel.ca or find us on our website, www.squeakywheel.ca, and our socials. For our comments, it is our focus to recognize all of our First Nations and Indigenous friends, share connection with Métis settlements, and listen to and show respect to our Métis brothers and sisters and families. Here at the Squeaky Wheel, we give thanks to our elders for their guidance and to Mother Earth for her time she allows us to be here and share her bounty. From all of us at the Squeaky Wheel, Tansi.